Hey everyone, this is Dandy Dragon, and today we're going to be going over stuff for team games. Specifically, we're going to start off with looking at civs and maps. Whenever you're in a 3v3 or 4v4, you're looking at a lot of potential variables: size of the map, distance from your opponents, distance from your allies, the availability of certain resources, and so on and so forth. So in these 4v4s and 3v3s, you have the potential to have very long games with a lot of different things that could happen and a lot of different strategies and compositions of civilizations and playstyles. So to start off with, we need to look at civilizations. What are they good at? What is their purpose? And kind of focus in on how they're going to impact in a team. Now, usually you're going to see one of three things, and you're going to see a civ that is going to be good at aggression, a civ that's good at defense, and a civ that's good at eco. Now, a civ could obviously have any number of those things, and for instance, we can look at a civ such as the Byzantines. When it comes to aggressive capabilities, they're amazing. They're a great aggro civ, but if we look at eco, same thing, they're still going to be great at eco. They have a bonus to trade, they have cisterns, they have olive oil, all really good things that give them a lot of capabilities. So let's start off with what are good aggro team civs and what makes them good. So starting off, we're going to look at China. China, is it a good aggro civ? It has one general playstyle that helps with aggro, and that will be Jungnu rushing or Barbican rushing. So I generally think that they're okay, not great. So in a map that's going to be really tight though, where you can get Barbican on your opponent without wasting a ton of walk time, yeah, I can see some value with that. And when it comes to getting a bunch of Jungnu and getting an infantry blob and feudal, same thing, if it's done soon enough, has a lot of good potential there. Or it can even just be done as a whole in the late feudal if it's not expected. So, okay, not amazing. Now, when it comes to Abbasid, I think Abbasid is in a similar boat. Not awful at it, but not really great. Usually they take time to build up their economy early. Their only really good immediate aggro is going to be military wing, but on a larger map, you're not going to see that utilized a lot. Now we have English. English is a good aggro civ in the sense that longbows can put in a lot of work, but a lot of what helps them in team games is the king. The king being a knight from the Abbey of King landmark that does a AoE heal with a large pull of HP and decent damage. So it's really good at getting at your opponent, doing a lot of early harass, even though it's only a singular unit, and it allows the heal allows them to support their allies' aggression. Now let's look at French. French is a great aggro civ. They have knights, they can get it out very quickly, and because of their faster villager production, they're able to keep some eco going in the back while they're producing knights, thus allowing them to go for a 2 TC build behind their knights, and so on and so forth. Now we have HRE. HRE, similar boat as English, and the reason I say that is due to the fact that they are able, because of military drills, their infantry are slightly faster than most, allowing them to get across the map a little bit better and giving them some good feudal aggro if necessary, but that's not really their strong suit. Now obviously Mongols, great aggro civ. They can put pressure in the Dark Age, they can put pressure in feudal with Mingedai very, very well. Very difficult civ for a lot of newer players to have to deal with, or at least just less experienced. Now, what makes them really good as well on top of that is they get a landmark called the, if I could think of it for one moment, the Silver Tree. Silver Tree gives them a discount to their traders, plus it can be built, and like all Mongolian buildings, can move on its own after it packs up and can then unpack. So you can set up trade in any location very easily. So not only are they able to make some of the best raiding units between Keshiks and Mangudai, they also can get good trade, or if they go for their other landmark, the Deerstones, they can get Khan's Hunters, which will increase the range of their ranged units. So really good aggressive civ. Now we have Rus. Rus, I would say, is about here. They're decent at early aggression. The problem is with them is that they take a little bit to get it online, as usually their eco requires them, if they want it to be strong, to do a little bit of a build up beforehand. So you're going to see quite a bit with them that they're going to want to go for a little bit later feudal aggro, but they do have access to knights, which is going to be your best raiding unit in the feudal age on a large map. Now next we got the Delhi, probably same boat. They got Ghazi Raiders, not as good as knights, but they can get them in mass, they counter heavy units, and then on top of that they can take sacreds in feudal age, which is really nice and very helpful. So you're going to see them able to do some good work. Now we have the Malians. Yes, they do have a quote-unquote feudal knight, so to speak, or good feudal harass with cavalry, but usually, once again, kind of in the same boat as HRE, they prefer to boom over aggro, but the potential is still there, and it's not horrible. Then we have Ottomans. CPE are great, Metters giving them a movement speed is good, they have good aggro in that regard, but the real strength of Ottomans is going to be coming from their Castle Age landmark that gives them free siege. So generally speaking, as Ottomans, you want to be getting into your siege blobs because that's your most powerful thing. But once again, their harass is not bad. You can do harass with Ottomans, don't get me wrong, it's just not going to be the strongest aspect. Next, we got Ayyubids. When it comes to feudal harass in team games, great civ. Desert Raiders, military wing, very good. If you're lucky and you're in the right position, you can go for the Gamble wing, I believe most people call it, or I believe it's also technically called the Bazaar wing, where you get the option to buy certain items or resources or units with gold. And there's Bedouin skirmishers and Bedouin swordsmen. Both are a decent unit, and if you are lucky to get one of them in a situation you do need them, it can be extremely helpful. Now let's look at the Japanese. The only real thing they have to really put on good pressure in feudal is probably their own Obogeshas. It's a very speedy infantry unit, and don't get me wrong, their samurais are strong and tanky and can deal to good damage, but that's not really the strength of the Civ. Once again, you're looking at more of a Castle Age timing, someone who wants to boom a little bit more, so that's more of where they're going to fall. Now we have Joan. Joan, just like French, but honestly, in my opinion, not as good on the feudal harass. Why is that? Why are they not as good as French? Well, that's because in a large team game, you're going to have time to get something like a second TC. You're going to be able to rush your knights out right away without much concern of pressure on you if you're putting the pressure on your opponents. So French is going to have a lot more safety and a lot more mobility by just having a pure cav corps of knights and not having to have Joan lug around. But obviously there is some use to French in the late, or to Joan in the late game. Now we have Zhu Shi. Honestly, same thing as China. You just don't have the Barbican rush, so you're going to be weaker in certain maps, but you can still do Jugnu, and you can actually do it better than China. So if you're going purely for the Jugnu, I would choose Zhu Shi over China, but once again, they're more of a Castle Civ or a late Imperial Civ, not really their focus. Now Byzantines, another great early harass civ. You could put them here or here depending on what your focus is. I generally would have them about in this range if you're going Hippodrome with horsemen or if you're going with Keshiks. If you're not going with either of those, maybe going longbow depending on the map, maybe jab throwers. You have some good potential there, but just not as consistent as what you're going to see from Mongols, Joan, and French. And lastly, we have Order of the Dragon. Honestly, I think they do better than HRE at feudal aggro, whereas I think HRE is kind of the opposite of Udid, where HRE is going to do a little bit better in Castle. Now, why is that? Honestly, for the simple reason that Udid get their Order of the Dragon special unique horsemen, and they're basically a knight. Now, would I prefer a horseman or from Udit or a knight? It can go either way, but you have the potential with them. And honestly, if you're focusing really heavily on them, you've gone Aachen, and you're just trying to get a Cav core out, you could probably even put them up here. The same thing as you could with Byzantine. They have the potential to be higher, but as a general rule of thumb, these are the civs and kind of where you're going to see them in terms of aggro, and at least in the feudal age. You're more likely to see these three are almost guaranteed to just always go immediately into aggro at the very beginning of the game. You're going to see these guys are likely going to get aggro out, or are going to at least be making supportive armies. Very rarely are you going to see Delhi trying to go into an imp rush. Sometimes they will go into a castle rush depending on their situation or their build, the map, so on and so forth. But the true goal of aggro and feudal is completely just met by these three. These five have good potential for it. These five have okay potential for it. And then you have these guys who are just, they can do it. It's not really their thing. They would rather be doing other things more often than not. But always understand you're going to be looking at the map for that. Now let's go a little bit faster through this. When it comes to eco, you can basically just flip the chart. You're going to see China, Abba, probably the Byzantines. Byzantines honestly can kind of just do everything. These guys are going to be up here in the eco. Zushi can do pretty well. If they can get their granaries up, they can be really high. They can have a great economy. We can see actually Mongols have a really strong economy in the late feudal kind of castle age with their trade. You can see Ottomans can do, they're not really great in eco, and we're talking at the beginning of the game, and they're kind of in this awkward position where they don't get any real bonuses to eco. Whereas Japan can be a little bit better because they can rush into castle and get Yoroshiros guaranteed, and then they can get some relics on top of that. Plus they have water, they have cheaper docks. You're going to see them doing all right. I would say HRE is a really good boom civ. If you go Aachen into 2TC, their economies could be really good. If you want to go fast castle into all the relics, that can be really good. So they're not bad. Rus is going to be doing all right. They can get they can get a fast castle decently well with floating gate, or not floating gate. I can't think of the landmark. Their feudal landmark that gives them tickets for trade. It allows them to get basically 50 free resources of their choice whenever they buy or sell, buy wood or food with gold, or sell food or wood for gold. On top of that, they can also use that to get a little bit faster second TC by buying their stone or their wood as necessary. They can get free gold from their food, so they can age up a little bit more efficiently. So overall, fairly decent. English, kind of in the same boat. I would say if there was a middle ground, I would put them there. They can get their second TC up fairly safely. They can get decent farms because they're cheaper. So they have a good transition, but in terms of their actual gather rates and the like, and passive resources, they're not that great, but I think they're okay. French, you're going to kind of see something similar. 2TC will be good for them. They can go Chamber of Commerce, get a lot of good early trade, and that'll do well. Now, Delhi, it's kind of the same boat, not really great. If you can get the sacred sites, though, that is very helpful for them. Or you can rush castle, grab relics, get a bunch of keeps up, get a lot of villagers. And in that early part of the FFA, or team game, not FFA, you're going to be able to get an okay economy. Malians, great civ for economy. Now, the issue you're going to see a lot of times is being able to keep your pit mines alive, and your strength of your economy, while the passive is really good, you are not going to get that up right away. And if your allies are not really good defensively, you're being open to a lot of dual pressure. But it has really good potential. If you're left alone and you can get trade, I would even put them up here. But for now, in a team game, I think they're probably in this category. Now, Ayyubids, I don't think they have a great economy. Honestly, I think that you're putting on a lot of hope that things are going to go the way you want them to do. They're not going to be. They do not get a faster production rate. Now, if you go for the right choice in your castle age up, You can get a decent amount of extra vills early on, but still it's not going to be the same as if you had gotten a lot of if you had gone double TC or mass markets and had a trade bonus or something of that shape or form. Joan, I'm going to be honest, Joan's eco is completely based upon her fighting and getting her military discount. In terms of economy, she's actually probably the worst civ. She has no real bonus. You can go Chamber of Commerce, but unless you're in a really, really defensive map, you're not going to get that. You do not choose Joan for an eco choice. Lastly will be Order of the Dragon. I think they do all right. They can kind of go here or here, kind of like before, where HRE was worse at feudal aggro. I think Uda is a little bit worse at the feudal eco, just from the inherent fact that you can get your Aachen to be a little bit better with HRE, and that's basically it. So they're not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Their villagers are very good. If you can rush Swabia, or if you go for second TC, you get a lot of villagers, they can do really well. But generally I would put them kind of in like here or here, it's kind of in this general realm. Now lastly, let's look at civs that have a good defensive capability. China's okay, basically just Barbican. Duke Nu are also a really efficient unit. They can kill just about anything, at least to a decent degree, so not bad. Abbasid, I don't think they're very good defensively. They're great eco civ, but in terms of the early game, you're not going to see them, like we're talking Castle before. Once again, not very defensive. You're basically just hoping that you have enough TCs and towers to garrison vills if you get raided. Now, English, great defensive civ. Like, if you want a defensive civ, I'll put Abba up here actually. You'll put English, and like if you need someone to hold the front, they're great. If you need someone to be on your wings, they're great. They're a very strong defensive civ. Once they hit castle, they get white tower, then they get Berkshire. A lot of like really quick like options for defense, and with their bonus to attack speed with towers, also good. French is the worst. French, I'll just put French and Joan. They don't have good defensive capabilities. Their defense is their offense. Now with HRE, decent defensive capabilities. They have the repairs. They can fast castle, grab relics, put them in towers, get the spring elden placements, good stuff. Mongols, once again with French, they basically just hope no one ever dives them. Their offense is their defense. Now with the Rus, you're going to see a little bit better defense if they go Kremlin. If they go multi-TC, this a little bit is decent. A lot of their economy will be passive in terms of their gold, so they can get a decent gold, so they're a little bit harder to harass because their fields are going to be in safer locations if they're prepared. Delhi, not really good defensively either. Their aggro, once again, is their defense. That's really going to be their focus. Now, Malians, honestly, defensively, they're all right. They have good counter units. They're cheap, and their economy is a lot of passive resources. You don't have to go out on the map a lot of the time, so good utility. Ottomans, good defensively. They have the free military, which makes sure you always have units, but you're not going to get a lot more past that. So whereas you have some units to defend, you're going to see Abbasid is going to have the TCs to hide. Ayyubid, also not a really good defensive civ. Once again, you're in this situation where you put aggro out with military wing, or you're just pumping out a lot of camels and you're putting aggro on your opponent, so that way they don't come to your base. Byzantines, I would say in the same realm as HRE. You have decent emplacements, but it takes a little bit to get there. You are going to have a lot of military, so you're kind of getting some good units to defend with, and a lot of it will be free because of the olive oil. So you have a lot of utility, and plus they have the ability that their cisterns give, that they can make all their villagers into spearmen, which means like a couple horsemen diving is not dangerous. They get passive stone for free, so as soon as they have feudal, they can start putting up stone walls. So that's also really good. You got a lot of good defensive capabilities from the Byzantines in the early game. Japan, Kura Storehouse. It gives them a defensive place to hide early. They usually get up at least one tower, then they rush castle. Not a great defense, but enough to keep them from being taken out of the game early from huge dives. Or the Dragon, kind of in the same boat. You're usually either fast castling and you don't have a lot of defense, or you may go for one extra TC, so on and so forth, but you're not going to have a lot that's in early. Now, if you go for a castle and you're getting your emplacements and stuff like that, I would put them higher, but we do usually see Udid as more of an aggressive civ. That's why I would normally put them down here. But obviously, if you're playing it in a more defensive faction, more like HRE, you're basically just a slightly slower HRE, which is not bad. So right here about is where I put them, if not like just up here. So Zushi, they have Jugnu, a great defensive unit. They do have some passive resources from meditation gardens. They can collect tax, which allows them to not have to go out on gold as much if it in a situation where you're getting a lot of harass at one moment. But they don't have any like emplacements or anything, so not awful, not great. Usually you want to kind of be left alone until later castle, if possible. So kind of in between here and here. So kind of take that your own measure. Now, what does that all mean? Like, why do you worry about this and that and this and that and this sort of thing? Well, when you're looking at a comp, you want to look at, am I on a boom map? Am I on an aggressive map? Or am I on an aggressive castle map? So basically, what is the map going to allow? And that's pretty straightforward. You're going to look at something that has choke points. Does it have water? Is it really tight? Is it really far? Those sort of things will, or when I say really tight or really far, how far away you are from your opponent's bases. So that's where having cavalry is usually a very good thing. So in terms of a really standard, for instance, Dry Arabia as a basis, you're going to want an aggressive civ or two. Maybe you want someone who can boom and someone who can defend. And you're going to pick those comps based on the map and what your party is good at. So, for instance, let's say you're on Hillendale, which is a defensive map. You're probably going to want someone that can put on an aggro while booming. So you're going to want someone like Mongols. They can get trade and put on pressure. And since it's a defensive map, you're likely to go Imperial. You want a good Imperial civ. So something like the Byzantines, the Rus, someone with like really strong military. Even French and Joan and French have some of the best siege options in the game, between Rebalquins, Mangonels, cannons, and if they go College of Artillery, they can get Culverins or Royal Culverins, which is an insanely good unit. And then now you have an aggressive option that can boom. You have good aggressive civs. You probably want someone defensive, so you would want an English or an HRE. And then usually you want someone that can be kind of a decent eco and a decent hitter. And you're going to want someone like Ottomans. So for instance, if I were on Hillendale, I would probably want a civ composition that looked like this. For instance, you would have Mongols putting on a bit of aggression, while the HRE is fast castling to grab relics. Ottomans are getting trade up, Byzantines are running defense, and then eventually everyone will begin trading in Lake Castle. You're going to have great bombards, culverins, nested bees, or just mass cataphracts, usually or mass Varynian guards, and then a lot of Mangudaiser hand cannoneers backed with the Kurultai, giving you a really strong comp that covers a lot of bases. So, but that once again is going to be based on what the map is and what your group is really going for. So civs that are going to be good in the aggro are going to be in the first list. Civs that are going to be good in more of a late game, you're going to see more of the defensive good boom civs are going to be up there. So you're going to kind of pick and choose based around, like I said, the map and what your team is good at. Now, when you're looking at that, you also got to keep in mind what your opponent is good at. For instance, if I'm running a Mongol, English, French, and Malian team, we're going to say, okay, we have really good Cav Corps, we have kind of a squishy front line from the Malians, but good raid potential. English is very good in general, but we're not seeing a lot of counter siege. So if we were to see, for instance, and this is not ranking, just here to see a list, if we were going against an Ottoman, French, let's say Byzantines, and Rus, you're going to see the Ottomans and the Byzantines and the French are going to have good siege core, or in all these civs are going to have a good siege core. They're all going to have a lot of good defenses in terms from the Byzantines are going to have a lot of stone, so they're going to be a little bit harder to press. The French obviously is going to be able to match the offensive capabilities of Joan. So the later the game goes, the worse it is going to be for this side, from the inherent fact that this team is going to have all good economies, a lot of passive resources, and they're going to have more of an aggressive focus. So you're probably going to more than likely want to win in the Castle Age. And obviously though, like, the skill of the players can come in, the map will come into play, all those things. So there's not a hard science to it in terms of like a really generalist playstyle. But now let's say you're looking at a pure aggro team. You got something like a French, a Mongol, another French, and let's say a Ubid player. You got a team that is definitely all good aggressive civs, so they want to be aggressive. And let's say your team has a HRE, a Rus, let's say an English, and a Chinese. None of these civs want to go heavy into the aggro. If they do, it's a very light method. They don't want to go completely out of their base. So you really got to be careful with how you're picking your fights. And on top of that, if you're on a really open map like Prairie, the civ with the pure aggro options are going to do better than these civs. Inherently, because they're going to be more open, you see more cav cores, it's going to be harder to react. It's easier to get overwhelmed. So if I were on Prairie, I would definitely want this team. But if I were on Hillendale, for instance, I may want this team, just because they have more late game capabilities, or at least castle capabilities. It should always be remembered that the strength of a late game military will come into play. Now, in the end, the eco of a civ is going to tie in directly to its defensive capabilities. So in Imperial, you have civs that are either good aggro civs, or they're good defensive civs. Now, what makes a civ good at aggro or defense? Can it throw away its armies? Are its armies very expensive and very powerful? Because obviously very powerful armies are going to be expensive. Now, civs that have really good strong armies that can clear out opponents, but it doesn't have an insane eco, you're going to see French with their siege blobs. You're going to see the Mongols, who are actually kind of in the middle, so I'll use this as the middle. They can get a lot of cannon towers, they have good trade, they can throw away armies, but they can also make really expensive armies and put all their resources into a hand cannoneer blob. Now, a civ that's really defensive and would be a Basset. While not good at early defense, they're going to be really good at late game defense due to the fact that they have culverins. They have really cheap armies that are just mostly food. They're very cost efficient, like camel archers. So good defensive options with them. Malians good defensively, not great offensively. They have no real siege bonus to taking out bases. So you're going to see them doing better overall in a more defensive fashion. China is going to actually be more like, they can kind of be in the middle. They have very elite armies that they can make with mass nest of bees. They can go with mass hand cannoneers, and they can go with strong military, but they have good defenses in terms of they have strong siege from the clock tower landmark, and they have the Great Wall of China, or Great Wall Gatehouse, that will also help them. So kind of in the middle. We have English, that's once again kind of a middle civ. They have good defensive capabilities, good aggressive capabilities. You can kind of play them either way. HRE will actually fall into more of a defensive category. They're going to be more of they want to hide with their culverins, quote unquote. I say hide, not literally, but they want to kind of stay behind walls with culverins that they can defend. They want to kind of drain up resources with villagers. And while their armies are very efficient and very powerful, they are going to die very quickly to mass Rebolthquins or mass hand cannoneers. So they're kind of going to be a more defensive faction. Rus is in the Imperial Age, especially if you go for the siege landmark in Imperial. They are purely an aggressive civ. They do not have stone walls. Their eco is good, but not so much they can throw away armies all day, every day. And they can mass a mass hand cannoneer blob with Streltsy that are cheap. So you're going to see a lot of good value from the Rus in terms of their military capabilities. The Byzantines, really strong armies, really strong defenses. As I stated before, they have really good emplacements. As they have mangonel emplacements, they get free stone, but they can have very elite armies with cataphracts and grenadiers. They can get camels that support the Varangian guards and give them high armor. They can get royal cannons. They can get a lot of good offensive capabilities and a lot of good defensive capabilities. So definitely a hybrid civ in the late game. Now we have Delhi. Delhi, they can be very defensive and they can be very aggressive. So, but they can only be one or the other. Whereas like Mongols can kind of put up a lot of towers and still put on aggression, or get a lot of hand cannoneers, then get towers, and so on and so forth. They can kind of, they're not as flexible, but they still do have good potential in both. I think they lean more in the aggressive side due to their elephants and their good men at arms. But if they can go for the discounted stone, which allows them a lot of emplacements, they can do all right. Or I say emplacements, a lot of keeps and a lot of walls, because they get the stone discount. So they have some options there, but I would lean them more in favor of aggro, and let's do it that way. We have aggro, leaning aggro but hybrid, kind of a good hybrid lean defense. So I would say right here, we probably put Byzantines on in the straight middle. I would say English is slightly more defensive. You have Ottomans. They are an aggro civ. They can be defensive, but the Great Bombars speak for themselves. They want to make those. They want to make Janissaries, and they want to push bases, and they want to destroy everything they can. They are very much an aggressive focused civ. And don't get me wrong, they have the Great Bombard emplacements, but that requires keeps and a lot of stone. So that's not something they get a lot of. The Ayyubid, definitely an aggressive civ. Their camels being able to make siege in the field is really good, or their cav in general. But I'm just going to give the warning now. The later the game goes, the worse Ayyubid tends to do. Luckily, they can make Ghulams, they can make Culverins, so they have some capability towards that, but they don't have a lot of eco to back it. So I usually don't lean towards the Ayyubids in terms of late game. Just keep that in mind. Joan, same thing as French. They love their aggression. They love that focus on putting pressure on, and because they can discount even their siege workshops and get 33 or so discount on wood and gold with the castle upgrade, they are going to be doing an insane job at getting a really powerful aggressive army. And if they Guildhall with stone, though, they can get a lot of capabilities in that, but usually that's not going to be your focus. Your armies are going to be very expensive. You're going to be putting your Guildhall towards food or gold, depending on what you need. Japan, pretty straightforward. They are a pretty good hybrid civ. They have really strong armies. They have really good capabilities, but they do have some good defensive options due to the Tanegashima gunsmith. They can go Castle the Crow, but if I were to lean them one way, definitely on the offense. They do get a lot of passive stone, though, so that shouldn't be kind of underestimated. The passive stone coming from the fact that they can get stone when they mine gold. So look out for them and what they can get, but they definitely have very elite armies that want to push out. Or the Dragon, same way. They can be defensive, but their armies are small in number, so despite having really good offensive capabilities, they really actually want to push into their opponent, fight in choke points, and really put pressure on their enemies using really elite armies that will directly counter whatever they're going against, leaning them towards a more aggressive playstyle. But once again, they do have all the benefits defensively that HRE has, but they do want to kind of use those in a more aggressive fashion more often than not. Zushi, we're going to see I would say in the late game, we're leaning towards aggression. They're hybrid, they have a really good economy from the granaries, they can collect taxes for passive gold, they can supervise their gold to get good gold gather rates from gold mines, and on top of that, they have probably the most elite cav core in the game. They have AoE bombars they can get, which are an insanely good unit. So you're seeing a lot of strong capabilities from Zhu Shi, and they don't get any passive stone. They don't get a lot of benefits to their defensive emplacements. You're going to see them leaning towards an aggressive playstyle in the late game. If not just outright, they are an aggressive civ. So this overall should tell you these are in late game. You probably at least want 1 to 2 of these civs if you're an Imperial, and then probably 1 to 2 of these civs. Now, so obviously, you could go Zhone, Zhu Shi, Ottomans, and Rus, and just have an insane late game army that can put on a ton of pressure. It's hard to beat, but you could also go in the other direction where you just have insane economy with these 4, and having like really strong defensive capabilities, and you're going to lean towards a more defensive map with that. So now let's look at the maps and kind of just get an idea of from more aggressive to more defensive maps. Altai, you're going to lean towards defensive playstyle. You have corner trade in the back. You have some inherent you have the mountain ranges on the side that are going to kind of tighten up your into lanes, so it's hard to flank. You're going to see a lot of defensive options on here. Ancient Spires, it's going to be in the opposite. You're not going to have a lot of room to build infrastructure. You're going to need a lot more pressure to gain control of the map. You don't have a lot of food options, so you got to fight over them. And overall, you're going to see a lot more aggression on Ancient Spires. Baltic, you're going to see kind of in the middle. There, you have some good defensive capabilities early from the water in the middle. Is going to force any early aggression onto the flanks, meaning only like 2 civs can be harassed at a time, or at least at the beginning of the game. And then the longer the game goes, the harder it is to defend due to the water being there as well. So you have to fight land and water, but early on, you're going to lean towards more aggressive play on the land, unless you're like really fighting for the water. Black Forest, definitely a defensive map. You're not going to be able to get a lot of early harass. More than likely, everyone's just going to put 1 or 2 tiny stone walls, and suddenly you can't harass them with anything in feudal. Like rushing feudal, grabbing stone, putting up a wall, booming, very common in a map like that. Now, Rocky River, you're going to see is leaning towards aggression, but it does have defensive capabilities, as in between each of those little ponds or rivers, whatever you want to call them, you can set up walls and then enforce fights and choke points, which more defensive civs or good siege blobs are going to be stronger at. Now you have Canal, and of course I'm not going to go through all these, I'm just going to get a general idea. Canal is going to be a more defensive map. It's a very open map though, so it's easy to get off harass, and because every civ or team is going to be kind of in a corner, you don't have a lot of inherent map control right off the bat, so you have to go out on the map to gain control of resources. So inherently a little less defensive than, let's say, Black Forest, but does have good defensive capabilities due to the inherent choke points. Cliffside, you're looking at, once again, a really aggressive map. You want more aggressive civs on these maps, just due to the fact that you don't have the ability to wall things off. There's a lot of cliffs, and as the name says, cliff sides. You have a lot of cliffs that you're going to be struggling to put walls on, and then overall you're not going to be able to really kind of turtle up. But the teams are going to be fairly close together, so if you are playing defensively on a map like that, you do have some options, but aggro will win out there more often than not. Continental, we're once again kind of looking in the middle. Everyone is kind of in a circle, kind of going around the edge. There is water, so you're going to see some slower play for some civs than others. You're going to see that water aggro is going to be really important in castle, and you're going to see some more castle pressure, like from civs, like maybe you're going to see a Burgrave rush on the flanks where someone's really close to each other. You're going to see those sort of options. So leaning towards kind of a mixed map. And the way to kind of view this is the higher up, more feudal, the lower it is, the more defensive, and the likelihood is going to go into Imperial. So keep that in mind. So then we have Confluence. We're looking at, once again, kind of more of a later game map, but can still be fought in feudal, but you're going to lean towards more of a castle's timing with that. Then you have Danube River, same situation. You're in choke points, you have the river, and generally speaking, in a hybrid map, you're going to see more defensive options, or in a map that has lanes like Altai. Dry Arabia is more of a aggressive map. You don't have as many resources, the wood lines are not as heavy, you're kind of open on all flanks, so you don't really have a immediate defensive option, so you're going to need some aggro on this map. Now for spawns, so once again, kind of in the continental Baltic area, you're going to see later game pressure, and thus you're going to see, later game pressure, thus you're going to see civs that are going to be better at defensive play or into booming more heavily. You got something like forts, same thing. Four Lakes, same thing. You have French Pass, which instead of having forest, you're going to have 2 mountain ranges between you and the team, like being here and here. So you're going to have only 2 choke points into each base. So you really kind of have to pick what you're going to be doing there at a kind of an early stage, whether you're going to try to really put pressure on, keep your opponents in the base, maybe try to get sacred sites if you're going to put on pressure, but more than likely you're going to be going into castle or imp, more than likely imp. You have Glade, once again, kind of an aggressive map, but with choke points. So usually in a map that's really tight, you're going to see aggro, but with choke points like you're going to see in Glade, you're going to have really strong defensive options that can come out. Golden Height, kind of the same thing as Dry Arabia. You're going to have a lot of openness where you have basically 2 civs and like a 4v4 that are going to be out in the open. One that's going to be kind of in a funnel, and you have one that's kind of in the back. So a lot of aggressive options early. If you want trade, you have to go for early aggression, and then if you want the water, you have to fight for that too. So definitely more of an aggro leaning map, but also like any map, there is some room for some boom. Golden Pit is going to be leaning more towards the aggressive side. While you can go across the middle, you're going to see that the 2 players on the flanks on each side are going to have more aggressive options to them, and everyone's going to be kind of going to the funnels because they're trying to avoid the center. The center is open, you can walk through it, but people tend to avoid it because if you put your vills out there early, you get that, you're going to lose your golds. If you try to go across the middle, it's going to take you forever to get to the other side, so you're better off just attacking the wing players. Gorge, we're looking at a more aggressive map, but with late game capabilities, leaning more towards aggression, but it is a single lane map. So if you defend well enough, it will turn into a late game map where you're really just fighting on the center section. Haywire, we're looking at more of a situation once again like Glade, where you're really tight, you want to get in pressure, but only certain civs are going to be able to work in a map like Haywire due to how tight of a map it is. Everyone's kind of inside that ring, so you're really needing like longbows. Longbows do really good at Haywire, but knights don't. So what normally may work won't work in Haywire. Keep that in mind. We have Hidden Valley, a more leaning defensive map, as every player is kind of next to each other and across the map. There is no wing players that are closer than others. So you're kind of once again looking at kind of a defensive position. Hideout, we're looking at something a little bit in the middle. You have defensive options, you have 2 different lanes, so you're looking towards a more defensive play style, but you can make aggression work if you do so properly. Like getting an English Ayubid team on one flank can put on pressure really efficiently, but for instance, you wouldn't want to go like double French because there's not a lot that French can do to how tight the base is, and the TC kind of protects everything. Have you more aggressive? Hill and Dale is going to be more defensive. Hemiyama is going to be more aggressive. King of the Hill is going to be kind of in the middle. Lipany is going to lean towards aggression. You're going to see marshlands go towards aggression. Migration is going to be... Honestly, I haven't played Migration, so I can't give a good opinion on that. Mongolian Heights is kind of in the middle. Early aggression can work, but generally speaking, you're going to see a lot of push for a later game in Castle, maybe early Imp, and not all ends all the time. And Mongolian Heights, like Rocky River, has choke points that you can generally wall off, but you're going to see a lot of the time people will take the river, take the choke points, and just boom to their heart's content in the back. Mountain Clearing is going to be kind of, again, it's going to be kind of this Haywire Glade area where it's really tight. so you're likely to see a lot of aggression coming out early. You have Mountain Pass, that's going to be a little bit more defensive, and pardon me for the dogs, if you can hear them, they're barking their hearts out outside. Prairie, definitely an aggressive map. You have very few wood lines. You're going to see civs, there's a lot of sheep, so you don't have to go out on the map as easily. So more aggressive civs don't have to worry about getting hit from the back as much on like a berry bush or a deer pack or something of that nature. Four Lakes, kind of once again leaning more towards the defensive play style. You're going to see Socotra kind of in the same area that, for instance, Haywire is. Same kind of nature to that. You're going to see Pit is leaning towards the aggression. You're going to see Turtle Ridge is going to be kind of in the middle, actually. It requires early aggression, take map control at the beginning, but you need to be booming behind it. You have choke points that allow you to defend, but it's important never to lose control of the center on that map because it does have aggro requirements. Wetlands, very similar to Ancient Spires. You're going to be spread out. You're going to need aggressive options. Volcanic Islands, we're leaning towards more aggressive lanes again. And let's kind of just look over that. We're going to have maps that require you to go out on the map, that require you to secure trade by fighting somebody, that have very few defensive choke points. That's what you're going to see from more aggressive maps. Maps that require a little bit more of a pullback, or maps where people are going to be under TC, where you're being forced into kind of these alleys or chokes that can be defended, and where allies can really usually support each other. So you can't just outright kill somebody because you're not really fighting one person or 2v1. You're going to be, or one person 1v1. You're fighting two people in a 1v2 or 2v2. You're not going to outright just usually have just an insane advantage. With these civs or these maps, you're going to see people focusing on certain areas. You need to have some aggression so you don't outright lose to certain things, like for instance a King of the Hill map with only one sacred site. You don't want Delhi just going in, grabbing it right away, and then you have no feudal military to contest it. Same thing with like Continental or Baltic. You want to really, all these maps, you can do some aggression, but it's not always going to work right away, and you're going to usually see the game drag out a little bit longer. Same thing with these maps. They have a very strong tendency to run later, and then especially the farther down you go, the more defensive the map is, the more likely it is to go into Imperial. You're going to need good siege, you're going to need good late game civs, and you're going to need good booming capabilities. So for reference to what we were talking about earlier in the video, we have the aggro favored maps, the kind of the more hybrid favored maps, and more defensive favored maps. So when you're looking at your civ compositions, when you're looking at maps and what your strategy should be, think on this and look at this map and be like, okay, is this more aggressive? Is this more defensive? What civs am I good at? What would be good here? And what would work well with my team? And in the end, that is before you even start playing, that is the first battle you have to kind of deal with and make a decision on. Sorry for that to run so long, but it's a lot of information to get into. Hopefully you all enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video in part 2.